In Animation Studio, you basically have two choices when it comes to the background of your video scene. You can choose to go completely blank and just leave it white and have your text and characters and other objects show up and be animated over this white background. But then you also have access to a library of backgrounds that's built into Animation Studio. With this library of backgrounds, it works kind of just like other things, like the graphics, for example. You'll even see a lot of these same pictures on the graphics page or on the templates or the stories page. But what's happening here is when you click on one of them, you're just setting this as the background of your scene. Now, it's important to understand that these backgrounds, they still work kind of like other things do, where um, some of them are animated. Like this one has clouds that are moving. It also has stoplights that's changing. Now, something that is worth pointing out here, with a background, you're setting this as the backdrop for your entire scene, whatever you are setting this background as. And you can't edit it, you can't set the timeline for it, you can't move it around. To my knowledge, I don't, well, I guess you can change it by just clicking on a new background. But other than that, you don't really have any kind of control over this background. Well, let's say you wanted to do something particular with this background. Maybe you didn't want it to just be stuck where it is. Maybe you wanted to be able to move it, or maybe you wanted to be able to have some kind of transition to it. In this case, what you can do is to actually go to your graphics tab. In this graphics tab, you should have access to the same background, this time in the form of the entire scene. So I still have the same background here, but this time, this background is actually an object. I could scale it if I wanted to make it larger or smaller. Maybe I didn't want to show the sky and I just wanted the road here. Maybe I just wanted to show kind of the intersection part of it. The other advantage to having your background as a selectable and movable object is that you can then do things with it. You can have transitions made, for example. So, what I mean by that is initially, you might want a background just showing up by default. But let's say partway through this scene, you actually want something else, a different background to start displaying. Well, I could choose this and have my background actually fade out. And then I could go in and choose a completely different background. Maybe I wanted it to switch to a different view of the roadway, for example. Then it would kind of dissolve out and switch over to this view. So now I do this. I set a transition to fade this in. And I'm purposely trying to overlap these transitions here. I have this one going up to 6.5 seconds. This one is ending at 6.5. So actually, I'm going to drag this one back about a half a second or so. So these things overlap for about a half a second, roughly, from the 6 to the 6.5 second mark. One will be dissolving out while the other one is dissolving in. And then the second one, I will have this one last until the end of the scene. So with this method, I'm still using backgrounds, but they're technically graphic objects now and not actually background objects. But doing it this way, I have this scene. Part of the way through, it dissolves out, and another scene dissolves in its place. You can also do this within the scene itself. Let's say I just had this one background image within my scene, and I wanted this to be there for the entire scene. But when this changes from this scene to a new scene that would take place after it, I can have the background and even other objects and stuff fade out from this scene and fade in the next scene. So the two scenes have a smoother transition from one to the next. So you don't just have to do abrupt cuts from one scene to the next. You can utilize even your backgrounds and fading them in and out, sliding them in and out of the page to give your video a more interesting look instead of just automatically jumping from this background to a different background. Now, in this same manner, you're not just limited to backgrounds that are built in the Animation Studio. Just like with all the graphics, you can simply load up your own image and use that image as a background image. Then you place other objects on top of it. If need be, you can bring these objects to the front to make sure they're on top of your image that you're designating as the background. And then, you can create whatever kind of background you want. You can go out there on Google and find a lot of different animated looking backgrounds such as these that you can utilize within your projects. So you're not just limited to what's in Animation Studio. And in most cases, unless you're going to be using just a set background for the entire scene and you do not want to use transitions, don't use the actual background feature. Use the graphics feature and set the background that way. That way you have more control over that background.